you just said, or maybe just wanting to get out of there and not have a clue what's going on.
I had an incident that I know of at work. And
Sorry, what?
There were outsiders coming in to evaluate the group, the working group. And one of the individuals was sitting there like this.
Yes.
And the outsiders nailed that person as being a non-team player, non-communicative, disrespectful.
Mm-hmm.
And in actuality, everybody in the whole team said he was the best coworker, the best person to go see. He was cooperative, he was a team player. But this outside company nailed him because, who knows, maybe it was cold. I know.
Yes, and he may have been cold. And it's also sometimes I think people want to be so respectful and they want to sit and listen that they don't realize that this could be closing themselves off. But that's fascinating. That's interesting to see the difference. So quite often, I know I've even judged people as others have. Maybe you see somebody and they look kind of disheveled and like maybe they're not really pulled together very well. And so a lot of times there's this impression of they don't have much education or they don't have much manners or they're kind of a mess, and so their work probably is too. And then you find out, all the degrees behind this person's name and they have all these qualifications, but they didn't come off that way, and it really hurt them as far as the kind of credibility that they immediately gained. So thank you for sharing that. It's very important. Okay. What's that you say? Now sitting, even when you're sitting and you're in a meeting, whether you're talking to a manager, a doctor, a patient, families, how you sit is very important. Because a lot of times if there's this barrier here, like I'm on one side of a desk or table and people are on the other side, that immediately says I'm the authority, you sit here and listen to me and listen to what I say. When you have to break down walls with people, a lot of times it's best to kind of sit next to them. Studies have shown that when men are in a room and they're trying to share information, they will withhold information if they're sitting across from each other where there's a table as a barrier. But if they're side by side or kind of at an angle, then they will actually share more information because they don't feel threatened, like there's this domination thing going on between them. When you're sitting, if you have your fanny to the very back of the chair and you're leaning forward, that shows that you're very engaged in the conversation with the person that you're talking with. So try to remember that too, because if we sit back and we're kind of aloof and we're doing that, quite often we're not paying attention or we're thinking about other things besides what's really going on and what's really important. So how you're sitting is going to make a big difference. Crossing body parts, we kind of talked about that. The more things we cross, whether it's arms, legs, and then if we twist our body to the sides on top of it, it's like go away. I used to teach modeling classes, and that was one of the things I taught the girls was if you see a guy approaching you and he's kind of creepy, you don't want him to approach you, cross as many things as you can, and that will tell them, hopefully, go away, I don't want to talk to you. The more open you are, the more that's going to invite people in to talk to you, whether you want them to or not. Now, too, with the hands, a lot of times if people don't know what to do them, I just said, put them down here. It's kind of like you're covering your crotch, but just put your fingertips together and put your hands down in front of you if you don't know what to do with them, rather than this, which is defiant, or this, which might make them feel like you're closing them off. Handshakes are critical. They're the universal greeting and saying goodbye, a handshake. And so what you do with that is important, and you always want to have a nice firm handshake. How many of you have pet peeves on shaking hands? Anybody? Julie, what's yours?
The wimpy.
The wimpy.
Yeah.
Or?
The crusher is my problem.
The knuckle buster. Yourself, you mean? Or
No,
just when people do that?
Yeah.
Yes. And a knuckle buster crusher is a lot of times trying to take control. Yes?
I actually had one man who used to work here do this to me, and it was really surprising, and I had actually read about it. But when I shook his hand, he took my hand and he turned it completely over like that. And that's supposed to be a sign of total domination.
I'm going to cover that one in just a second. Yes.
I responded by, this wasn't even a thought process. I immediately responded by tightening my grip and just jerking his hand back up to the proper place.
That's exactly what you should do. And you did exactly the right thing, because a lot of times with a wimpy handshake, it either says, I have no confidence in myself, so so I'm not going to give you my full me, all of me, my hand. Or it said, you're not really worth my time and effort, so you only get my fingertips. Either one is very, very negative. So you always want to make sure the web of that part of your hand fits into the web of the other person's hand, and it's upright. Because salesmen especially have been taught to take a woman's hand like this, because that gives them the upper hand, okay? And it is a domination thing where, okay, I'm gonna do this to you, and I'm gonna shake your hand this way, and subconsciously you're gonna be submissive and you're gonna buy this car I want you to buy, or whatever the case may be. And I remember a car salesman did do that to me, but it didn't register until we had let go, and then it was like, darn it, I missed my chance to do exactly what you did. And so that's very, very important. And when I was giving a program to a business women's group one day, and I was talking about this, and I said, always turn your hand up like this and take control back. And one of the gals said, do you know what I do when the guy does that to me? And I said, what? And she said, I take my other hand and I put it on top of his. It's kind of like when you're choosing people for teams with a baseball bat, and you go up there. And so I said, so what do they do when that happens? She said, boy, they pull their hand out really fast because they don't like that. Their game got messed up. And so it's really fun to try doing things like that. But remember, that handshake is so important. But there are also subconscious messages going on at the same time while you're shaking hands. Always give a firm handshake. Lean in slightly towards that person, whether it's a doctor, a patient, a family, somebody you don't know, a supplier. But lean in slightly. If you can tell what color eyes they have, you've made even better connection. Give at least 3 pumps and say something like, it's very nice to meet you. You don't want to say, I'm happy to meet you, because all the emphasis then is on you. It's very nice to meet you. And so always do that and shake. Give a nice firm handshake, and then you let loose. Eye contact is very important in most countries, although in some countries it's disrespectful, especially if a woman does that. And so you always want to know culturally, especially when you're in a medical field, you meet people from all cultures all across the world. So you want to be familiar with who looks at that as a sign of credibility, that you're telling the truth, because a lot of times eye contact says if you're being truthful or not, or who looks at it as a matter of disrespect. So again, a lot of that is just learning what's most important. Mirroring, this is excellent. How many of you at one time in your life or another, you have someone that you just can't break barriers, get across? We all have, haven't we? And so mirroring is excellent. Did any of you besides me, when you were little, mimic a brother or a sister? And you're laughing, I know you did. Will they say something and you repeat exactly what they say, just drive them crazy? I used to do that all the time to my sisters. Well, mirroring's kind of more of an adult, mature way of doing it, where you can actually break down some walls. And so if you are having trouble talking with someone and you're just not getting through to them, it could be a child too, could be a spouse, whatever, you start mirroring them, and you have to do it very casually so they don't catch on to what you're doing. And so, somebody's either standing or sitting, they're doing one of these and they're looking really serious, and you're going, oh boy. So as you're talking to them, you can just kind of put your hand up here, and don't do it immediately after they move, but do something like this. And then maybe they put their hands like this. And so if you're sitting at a table, you can just kind of casually put your hands like this at the same time. And what you're doing is you're saying, I like you, I'm with you, we're on the same page. And quite often, it really will break down barriers. And I heard a neuro-linguistic programming lady say once, you know what, when you feel like you've broken down the barriers and you've built up a good rapport now and you're really having good communications, stop mirroring them and see if they start subconsciously mirroring you. Then you got them. And so a really good example of that is when I used to work for some radio stations, one of the managers came in and he was really excited because he had sold this huge radio advertising package. And I said, Val, what's going on? And he said, well, I went in to sell this radio package to this guy, and he wasn't friendly, he wasn't very nice. Matter of fact, he said, you know what, when you came in here, I didn't even like you. He said, but I do now, and I don't know why. So what had happened was Val was mirroring this guy, and he was breaking down all these walls and barriers to the point where the guy actually bought the radio package from him. So he was all excited, and he did that through mirroring. So try that, it's fun. Just do that as an experiment, if nothing else. Again, we talked about hands and legs, that's very important. Now touching is another thing. A lot of times people want a nice, oh hey, that was a good job. Just give them a nice friendly touch on the shoulder or on the hand. Other people kind of, coil back and go, don't do that. And so again, you want to watch how people are responding. Some people need the warm fuzzies. I had been a battered wife, and so I know at one time it took me years before I would let anybody even touch my shoulder to do that. So again, it's not you. It's just how do people react to us differently. And so watch how people respond to you touching. Usually it's favorable, sometimes maybe not. Pointing. May I borrow your pencil, Ben, just for a second? Okay, a lot of times you'll have people that need to sign something for you. And so if I were just to hand this to you and say, would you sign this please? Would that bother you the way I'm doing it? It wouldn't. Okay, some people feel like you're pointing at me and I don't like it. And so what I've said, if you have people who need to sign things for you, just hold your pen like you were going to write with it. Go, would you sign this please? It's funny, things that are so little like that can make such a difference in how people respond to us. I remember one time when I was working at the now infamous Enron in Human Resources, and Julie and I go way back from Enron days, and a gentleman came in to talk to the HR manager. He had all the education, he had all the work experience, he had everything they wanted for this position. And so he not only sent the hiring manager a thank you note, he sent her flowers, and she wouldn't hire him. And I said, Beth, why won't you hire him? He has absolutely everything you're looking for. And she said, well, because sometimes the shirts that are not only all cotton but a little polyester, and you get the little tiny nubs, little tiny fuzzies that maybe you want to shave off. Well, apparently he had some of those little fuzzy nubby things on his collar. And she said, to me that showed a lack of attention to detail. This is a very detailed position, so I don't think he's qualified. I was so shocked, but that shows you how somebody can take the most minute little thing and they can make a judgment about us, our abilities, strictly by something, that small and insignificant. So again, that's why you really want to watch people. And then diversity. It's a very diverse world and things certainly are changing fast, and so we always want to watch how people respond to us. And sometimes if the person is physically challenged, maybe they're in a wheelchair and they have some issues, or the language barriers such, the way the person talks is maybe very hard, a thick accent, hard to understand, and so what do? We tend to want to talk too loud, thinking, okay, maybe they can hear me better or understand me better. And so when I was working with a lady who had a supplier, it was a Chinese lady, the lady I was working for had a supplier in New York City that was a Chinese lady, and she had a very, very thick accent. And so Ione was always yelling at her in the phone, thinking that would help her understand what she was saying. And so one day the lady said, I not speak good English, but I'm not deaf either. And so, there again, we just have to watch what we're doing and see how people respond to us. I chuckled about that, and I always use that because it just cracks me up. Okay, another thing. How many of you maybe have to do any kind of a presentation, or maybe have to get your point across to somebody, and sometimes it's a little difficult? Any of you? Some of you? Okay. One of the things that CEOs, politicians, attorneys, all our favorite people, do is called steepling. What does that do? You take up more space. Now, as women, a lot of times in order to get the credibility you want and deserve, particularly from the male side, you want to do that. You want to have more credibility by steepling and taking up more space. And so as you're walking, or as you're standing, or as you're presenting, you could just very casually put your fingertips together, and your shoulders are out, and you're taking up more space, more room. As you expand the area around you, you're gaining more and more credibility. So sometimes if you're walking around, just do that. People will actually pay more attention to you. Now, one experience I had with that when I was sitting was that on a Friday afternoon, I was talking to a gentleman that had when we had telemarketing companies here, and I had gone to talk to him about doing some training for them. However, it was a Friday afternoon. He had been on the road all week. His office was hot. He had been driving back to Omaha all morning. The last thing he wanted to do was talk to anybody else, and I understood that. Poor guy, he was so tired. So I'm sitting across from him, across from his desk, and he's almost starting to doze off to sleep because he's so tired. So I thought, okay, I just read this, I'm going to try it. So sat in the chair, and I was just very friendly, and I put my arms on the chairs, and I started steepling and getting bigger in my chair. And he actually perked up and he started listening to me and paying attention, and then we were able to have good rapport. I almost started to laugh because I thought it was pretty funny. You know, it was just kind of a test, but it really worked. So think about taking up enough physical space when you need to by steepling, either sitting or standing. Now you notice Tony Blair, the former Prime Minister of England, see how he's doing it as he's sitting down. But there's also another way of steepling, and I'm not quite sure. I think he's doing the other way. The other way is not only are you taking up more presence, but you can also use it as a defense mechanism. Because most of you probably have encounters with people who aren't maybe being real pleasant at the time. And so if these are sharp and they're out here like this, you can also use that as a defense mechanism, because it's kind of like saying, don't come in here. You think of the old, this is a church, this is people, all that kind of goofy stuff. But you can also do that if someone's verbally attacking you, especially if you're sitting down. It will say, stop, you're not getting in here. Another thing is tilting your head. Studies that shown that when men and women are in a conference room or in a meeting, women will often, more than the men, tilt their heads. It's a sign of a good listener, but it's not a powerful position to speak from. So make sure if you are tilting your head and listening, that when it's your turn to make a point, that you have your head up, your chin up, and you're speaking directly to them. That will make a big difference in how they respond to you. Studies have also shown that when men or women are in a room, a woman usually nods her head to say, go on, I'm listening, give me more information, tell me more, tell me more. And so she's saying more information. But the studies have proven that usually when a man nods his head, he's saying, okay, I'm done, or we're agree, or enough said, and we're out of here. And so a lot of times when there's men in the room, I'll say, guys, you just have to cut us some slack because we think you want more information. That's why we keep talking and you're wanting us to be quiet. And so if you don't agree with something, you can say, okay, I understand, but no, I don't agree. Or I need more information. Otherwise, a lot of times they will look at you like, okay, she agreed with me. Enough said, we're done. And just something that even small. Introducing yourselves too soon. Does anybody besides me have trouble remembering people's names? Why is that? Well, that first 7 seconds, we're so busy checking out their hair, their clothes, their teeth, their shoes, anything. We're checking them out visually, and so we're not actually listening to what their name is. That's why we forget a lot of times. And so even though it feels uncomfortable and kind of odd at first, I've told people that you should always introduce yourself by what you do, for whom, and then say your name. And it's really funny because some of the empowerment breakfasts and the networking that I've gone to lately, when people get up one at a time and they say their name and their company and then they sit down, a lot more people have adopted this method because by then people are stopping to look at what they look like and actually listening to them. And so in my case, I would say, I'm an author, speaker, trainer, and coach with Transformation Academy. My name is Rita Rocker. And so that way they're able to listen. If we had more time, we'd just kind of go around the room and have you do that. But notice also, I pause between my first and last name, put a little bit more punch on the last name. That will help people, first of all, to understand it, and then also to be able to remember it a little bit better. So try that when you're introducing yourselves by what you do, for whom, the company, department, etc., and then say your name. It really can make a big difference in how people remember you. Studies have shown also that when men and women enter rooms, men make about 12 movements, adjustments, whether it's getting papers out of a briefcase, etc., maybe taking off their jacket. Women